Hi, this is Dick Clark. You know, I got thinking there isn't any way I'm going to be able to ramble about the past 20 years of my life in and around rock and roll and get it done in any reasonable length of time. Too much has happened. I have so many great memories I'd like to share with you. But one of the things people ask me most frequently is who made their first appearance on television on one of the shows you produced? And I'd like to share some of those memories with you. Keep in mind that when American Bandstand started back in Philadelphia days in 1952, all the big stars came by. Four Aces, Eddie Fisher, Georgia Gibbs, Patti Page, Don Cornell, Johnny Ray. Rock and roll? Well, Alan Freed hadn't broken that on the world yet. I remember Bill Haley and the Saddlemen. He later decided that the Comets was a little more appropriate. On another day, many years later, I had a request from these gentlemen to see if I could dredge up an old kinescope of their first American Bandstand television appearance. It was November of 1957, as I recall. They came to Philadelphia, complete with crew cuts and smiles and eager young faces to promote a record. Matter of fact, they had a different name in those days, Tom and Jerry. That was the first network television appearance of a couple of fellows named Simon and Garfunkel. Now, when we started the Saturday night Dick Clark show in New York, the network people thought it'd be a great idea if an older established star introduced a newcomer. So we got Johnny Ray to introduce a girl singer. Her father, as a matter of fact, picked her songs. He's the fellow who picked Who's Sorry Now because it was a favorite of his. Johnny Ray introduced her, Connie Francis. I once got a favor call from a famous talent manager. She said to me, could we please use this very bright, talented, shy young man? He wasn't a rock and roller, but she was sure he'd be a big star, and we booked him. And he came back many times, and he was shy and very talented. And he's still a giant. He made his first appearance on the bandstand. Johnny Mathis. Somebody else said to me, got a kid we found on a doorstep in Philadelphia. Wait till you see him. He looks like a cross between Elvis Presley and Ricky Nelson. We put him on television, and we developed a very special close-up shot to accentuate his sensuous good looks. We called it the Fabian shot. You know something? They're still taking Fabian shots of Donny Osmond and Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney and Alice Cooper. Now, this fellow didn't really want to do our show, but his manager was and still is a very close personal friend of mine, and I asked him for a favor. And they came. They made their first national television appearance on the Rock and Roll Dance Show. Jim Morrison and the Doors. Now, this young man was a Philadelphia trumpeter. His manager thought he'd sound a little more commercial if he held his nose as he recorded his first record. And he held his nose. He knocked every teenage girl of the 50s for a loop with a thing called Dee Dee Dinah, Frankie Avalon. Now, this cocky young fellow used to come to Philadelphia regularly. He hadn't had a hit yet. He did all the record hops, but he tried hard. He hung in there, and he finally got a hit. And another hit, and another, and another, and another. And then he came to me. We'd become pretty close personal friends by then. He said, I'm going to switch styles, Dick. What do you think of this record? And I listened to it, and I said, ooh, boy, that isn't what your fans expect. That isn't you. That record is never going to make it. Don't do it. I wonder how many times he's sung that song since that conversation. The song was called Mac the Knight. His name was Bobby Darin, of course. Well, these four wonderful guys dragged all the way down from San Francisco to do Bandstand. They were extra busy, and so were we in those days, so we taped their guest appearance for future use. And somehow or other, these things happened 2 days before the thing was to air, coast to coast. The tape got erased. We'd already announced their appearance. Boy, we were in a jam. So we got them together again, and we taped another segment just in time for them to make their national television debut. John Fogerty, Creedence Clearwater. Now, when these folks arrived in the studio, they scared everybody. You probably don't remember the first time they appeared on the bandstand. The Jefferson Airplane. I remember having an argument with a talent coordinator of a show we did called Where the Action Is. She didn't like to book this act. She didn't want to book them. She said, they don't look like our kind of people. They're just not right. You shouldn't do it. And I said, well, how about booking them anyway? And she did. Thank goodness. The Mamas and Papas. This man came to Los Angeles with big, shiny, mirrored glasses on. He'd never appeared on television before, and I must tell you the truth, I think he was nervous. He had a mystique about him. I remember that day he came by. That was Isaac Hayes. I saw these kids first at a reception given by a friend of mine who used to sing with a singing group. A friend told me they were great. And when they appeared on the American Bandstand for the first time, the audience went crazy. The friend's name was Diana Ross, and she was the first to ask us to present the Jackson 5. Hey, sometime when we have a little more time, I'd like to tell you about some of the other first appearances by people like old Bobby Rydell, Chubby Checker, Dionne Warwick, The Fifth Dimension, Red, Loggins and Messina, Melanie, The Guess Who, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Fats Domino, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, David Cassidy, James Brown, Neil Diamond, many more. You know, we presented over 8,000 individual performances on American Bandstand alone, not to mention a dozen other shows in the past 20 years. And I guess the answer to who made their first appearance on one of your shows would be answered easier by listing the folks who haven't. The fact of the matter is there have been a lot of folks who've been with us, and it's always